And our next panel, yet again, is another buzzing session. This topic is supply chain resiliency for Indian healthcare and pharma, focus on regional dependencies. And I will, as usual, introduce our distinguished panelists to all of you. And as I call out your names, I would request the panelists to please come on stage and take your seats. First, we have Mr. Arun Kumar, Vice President and Head SCM, Metrochem API Private Limited. Then we have Mr. P.V. Raju, Senior Vice President, Supply Chain, Biological E Limited. Louder claps, please. Yes, thank you. Next, we have Mr. Ram Kumar, Global Head, Manufacturing Science Technology Group, MSTG, OSD and Sterile, Cipla. Our next panelist is Mr. Abhirup Das, Chief Operating Officer, Oren. Thank you all you panelists for joining us. And to moderate this round of discussion, I would like to call upon Ms. Sudipta Veerapaneni, Partner Supply Chain and Network Operations Practice at Deloitte. Over to you.
Very warm welcome to the panelists and the delegates over here. What a wonderful evening that we are all gathered here. And really looking forward to this discussion on supply chain. It's very close to my heart, and that too in pharma, and what best place to sort of do this in the pharma capital of India. In the last few years, I think there's been a lot of focus around pharma, the supply chain of pharma and supply chain in general. I think we have all seen a lot of disasters and disruptions that have happened in the supply chain space, and pharma, obviously with the COVID, it was completely disrupted that way. Having said that, I think we all are very much aware, in terms of the focus that is there on pharma and life sciences industry in India now. We are sort of the third largest suppliers of vaccine. In this state itself is, the largest supplier, I would say. This state itself has the largest number of US FDA approved manufacturing units, which are outside of US. So certainly, a great place, and, recently another company sort of came out with the IPO. So there is a lot of focus in terms of investments that are also coming in. So with that, maybe I'll start the panel discussion, around how do you build resilience and, some of the challenges that are there around the resilience to be built in the supply chain. We'll broadly look at 4 major areas. The first one would be around supply chain and the associated risk that are specific to pharma industry. And maybe I'll start with Mr. Arun Kumar first. What are the key healthcare and pharma risks that you're seeing, and some of the regional dependencies that are there, which are very pertinent for us to sort of look at as well?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me go directly to the topic. As you are aware, supply chain had come under tremendous stress post 2019 December when the COVID started. So the entire supply chain was taken back, that nobody was prepared to counter the implications what we had because of the start of COVID. And post that we had this COVID declaring as a pandemic. Followed by we had some geopolitical issues across the globe, where we had Suez Canal blockages and some embargoes put by Government of India for lot of pharmaceutical imports into India. So this was an eye-opener for the entire supply chain, especially on the healthcare and the pharmaceutical industry. If you talk about the healthcare, the risks associated due to these disruptions were fairly different from other industries, where the stakes were the human lives. Whereas in the pharma supply chain, we talk about the disruption of supplies, launching of the products, and even some of the pharma studies which has been skipped to bring the drugs into the market. So when you talk about the healthcare supply chain risks, what people have is each healthcare sector should have their own corporate risk management strategies. This was not a very dominant thing which was there in the past, but post COVID, this has become predominantly a very important topic, where in the healthcare you talk about the clinical and administrative risks, and we talk about the risk associated directly to the patients and the doctors and the staff who work into that. So until and unless you quantify those risks and have the mitigating strategies, it would be very difficult to operate. Whereas in the pharma supply chain, if you talk about is the value chain, whatever the risks associated in the entire value chain, where the pharma industries were under the tremendous stress, since the upstream and the downstream supply chains were totally affected. And it has also impacted many of the pharma innovator companies where they were in the process of launching of new drugs, which was totally taken aback because of these disruptions. Today, if you talk about in India, about 50% of the active pharma ingredients are imported into India from various countries. So we definitely depend on the overseas suppliers for this, since we do not have we didn't have the R&D capabilities to develop or make the product very swiftly to the market. So where the spend on the R&Ds were restricted. So that is where when this pandemic started, there was a lot of stress on pharma supply chain, because we didn't have the raw materials, we didn't have the finished products or the intermediates to cater to the requirement. So this has brought in a new dimension on supply risk assessment and mitigations. Apart from this supply risk, we have the regulatory challenges and the statutory challenges, which has slowed down the entire process. So I feel now it's a time that each pharma industry and the healthcare should definitely look into the supply chain risks and bring out a solid mitigations plans so that these interruptions are not there in the future.
Valid point. I think just to encapsulate, one of the points that you touched upon is in terms of the regulatory framework, which needs a greater focus from the pharmaceutical companies as well as the regulators as such. And in addition to that, the focus, in general, we have seen that not just in pharma companies, but supply chain was always a back-end operation, right? It was more of something which was not really highlighted in that sense. But now with the pandemic, this has sort of become a boardroom discussion as well, and this is an agenda which is there on top of almost every CEO's topics that they want to go through as well. And given this, it is no longer a cost differentiator. Supply chain was always just in time and to making sure you're very cost efficient, but now you're really looking at some of the other elements which are very important for the customer, whether it is you're looking at ESG and some of those aspects. So not really a cost differentiator, but how can you actually differentiate yourself in the market through supply chain is something we can enable. And you touched upon one of the areas is the spend in the, the industry spend itself in this space. So that sort of takes us to the next topic, which is around the PLI scheme, right? So pharma industry, which, in 2020, they received almost 15,000 crores of PLI scheme, and there are certain beneficiaries which came through that as well. And not just large companies, but even small MSME, companies that we are looking at. But having said that, I'll ask both Mr. P.V. Raju and Ram Kumar if you can share your thoughts on how the PLI scheme has panned out, and if that is sufficient for us to really, when we are talking about making India as a manufacturing hub for pharma, is that sufficient enough, or there are other parameters you want to sort of look at as well?
Hi, good afternoon to everybody. Before going to the discussion on the PLI, what will be the opportunities, what areas we need to focus. Actually, this supply chain resiliency initiative is actually initiated by three policymakers or governments: India, Japan, and Australia during the pandemic in 2021. Part of the process, Government of India announced the scheme for supporting Indian pharma companies to make sure that medicines is available across the country. The objective of that is they designed that this activity with this activity with 5 pillars of the supply chain resiliency. One is vulnerability. A second pillar is that management of culture. Third pillar is procurement. Fourth is the operations, and fifth is the demand and visibility. That's first two is very critical, identifying the risk and assess the alternatives. The balance 3 pillars will support the first 2 pillars. That is the ideology behind that they announced the scheme. Comes to the PLI scheme is concerned, so a lot of product is shortlisted. Everybody say that we are depend on the China for both intermediates and APIs. We want to replace it. You develop a product, government will finance the that kind of product linked incentive scheme. That's what they announce. But our suggestion is that when you are selecting the product, you should be careful. I would like to give 3 examples. So one thing is first generation biotechs, penicillin derived products, which is originally importing from China, and it's now using by Indian companies. So somebody say that no, you set up a penicillin G project in India. They're missing the other point in this segment. Where is the source material getting from there to manufacture the penicillin? Fluorospar, so the mines is in China. So you're saying that you want to replace. It's not possible. The similar way, the second example you take, metformin, the main intermediate, key intermediate is DCDA. DCDA, the source material is cyanamide. Cyanamide, 80% of the mines based in China. So that's also one of the, you want to replace before you selecting a product, you think very carefully. Are you really creating a sustainable systems for the India to make sure the public, they'll get a sufficient amount of medicines. One more product is like enoxaparin sodium. See, enoxaparin sodium base material is porcine based pig intestine. That's where they're sourcing the raw material. Again, that 90% of that's heparin sodium porcine based in China. So entire global is importing from them. So you are selecting this kind of products. You want to say that we are creating a sustainable approach. That's very wrong methodology. So what we are looking for, we need to focus on that, create alternative APIs to these materials, which can secure that our country and the system, the value part of the PLI scheme also very useful. So my request maybe you need to focus on those instead of copying where the source material is coming from some other country, not only China, somewhere other countries also some of the materials. So it's very important. You need to create an alternative process to manufacture similar kind of API, which can help part of sustainable supply chain approach, as well as the government what they encouraging PLI scheme, which also reasonably some weightage is for this. I want to
maybe a very valid point. I think just like how we had PLI 1.0 and then we had PLI 2.0, maybe 3.0 should incorporate some of these suggestions as well. Maybe your views as well, Ram, on this.
Yeah. So I think Mr. Raju already summarized it quite well. So we are having this production linked incentives, which has definitely helped us in minimizing our reliance on different countries on which we have, but definitely we should keep in mind that even if we are reducing our reliance, if mines are there in countries like China and other places, maybe that may not work because still we may be dependent on those. So the next point which we have to move around is around innovation. So that is what will be helping us in longer term. Because if we have one process, can we think it differently and make it in a different way so that we can cut down complete reliance on these different countries which we have. So I would like to elaborate more on the innovation related, and apart from PLI, which we already have, I think we need to have something called innovation linked incentives, which will help us more in future. And let me try to elaborate on this. So when I talk about innovation, I have in mind about three things. So first, we are number one in generics worldwide. But if we see what is happening is input cost is increasing. And if you see the selling price, that is decreasing because of a lot of pressure from government. So overall, what is happening is the cost is, there's a lot of cost pressure. And to be really competitive in generics, we have to innovate even in our manufacturing, what we are doing currently. So point number one is we have to innovate even with our current manufacturing process. So what we have to do is we have to really reimagine our manufacturing process. And here there are two things which will help us. First is the push around digitization and artificial intelligence, machine learning. Because what we have seen as part of our digital journey, which we experienced through when we got certification of World Economic Forum, almost there is the reduction of 20% in terms of cost if we implement these tools and technologies related to artificial intelligence, machine learning, because they tend to improve productivity and we are able to do things in a different way. And second is, along with digital and all these initiatives, we have to also think about different manufacturing approaches. For example, new manufacturing approaches like continuous manufacturing, which you can integrate right from API till the end. So you put API and then you get tablet. And what this will do is this will also enable flexible manufacturing. So what will happen is we can really scale up our processes fast. So if I have to run a continuous process, the only parameter which I have is how much time I run. So the longer I run, I get a bigger batch. Shorter I run, I get a smaller batch. So that is where it will help. Second, where I see manufacturers going is really trying to extend the manufacturing value chain. So currently we are mostly working with traditional generic. But if we see next generation of generics, those are around mostly biosimilars and also complex injectables, which are very different from what we have been manufacturing till now. So for doing that, again, we need a lot of innovation, and there has to be a lot of collaboration between research institute and also manufacturers and also government. And that is how we can ascend this manufacturing value chain. And third innovation which we need is really related to novel manufacturing platform. So if you see what has changed in last few years is we are now able to target diseases which we could not target because of lack of technology or science. So to give you an example, currently there is a therapy called Luxturna which is available, which can cure some form of genetic blindness. So just imagine, that is the possibility which is happening. But problem is, all the innovation which is coming from countries like Europe and US, they are very expensive. So to give an example, a therapy which is there called Zolgensma, which is for spinal muscular atrophy, this is a gene therapy. It costs around 16 crores in India, which is completely unaffordable for our country and also for many other developing countries and countries like Africa, where we will see a lot of population growth happening. So this is third innovation which we have to focus on. And here again, the requirement will be on collaboration between research institutes, manufacturing, and also government setting the right structures. And looking at all these three innovations, I think we have done a good job with PLI, but we have to, along with PLI, we have to start uh, involving something called innovation linked incentives, which can be like ILI or something, or RLI, research linked incentives. So that is where I see Sudipta. So from PLI to ILI.
Great 2 points which have come. One is definitely around the product linked incentive schemes, which is to really say that are these products which we are sort of the base product itself, we are importing into India and then sort of exporting. The other, which is around the innovation linked incentives. And India as a country, we are known for a lot of frugal and jugaad innovation, right? We are really looking at those are also required. You need to have frugal innovation, which will give you step improvements, but really looking at R&D and sort of, looking at ways in which we can bring in that, exponential leap that we are looking at, right? And the third aspect which Ram sort of touched upon is the whole digitization and the data capturing part of it, right? Which is very important for us to draw any insights that are required and build on top of that. So with that, I'll invite Abhiroop as well, to sort of touch upon. I think he deals a lot on data and technology. So let's hear from him. Oren, from Oren Technologies, I believe that's a Hebrew word. Which means pine trees, which is sort of linked to greenery. That's how I understood it. So maybe if you want to speak a little bit about how the data capturing process, sort of in this environment, insights on top of that.
Thank you. So as we all touched upon multiple aspects of supply chain, again, like we discussed about the risk factor into it, and then kind of like the incentives for the like innovation and these practices. All of these things revolves around data. So I'll just narrate it with an example here. And again, I look back into my childhood days when, let's say, like if there is anyone visiting our home for that event, like mom and dad, they'll be like building up an entire chart that these are the things that we need for refreshments and then for the dinner and everything. So what will happen, like my mom will give this list to dad to get this thing from the nearby shop, right? And he will go to the shop, like go to multiple shops, figure out what will be the lowest pricing, where we'll get the best product, and then get back everything in a single go. Now, like now today, when we have Swiggies and the Zeptos of the world, where everything is getting delivered in 10 minutes, and where they are being able to deliver the product which we need as per the quality that we need, and with that kind of an accuracy. This is based on the data itself. Like right now, based on the locality where you reside, they have the database that what will be the consumption pattern of these area in this locality, and that's why they're able to fulfill at least 80 to 90% of the orders on that like delivery time less than 10 minutes, right? So this is the power of the data that we should also implement in the B2B context. If we can transform our buying experience being a consumer, why can't we do it in a business context, right? That is where the digital transformation in the supply chain comes into picture. This is one of the first aspect. Second aspect is that now, as in the last panel also we discussed about the ESG spectrum, the risk spectrum of the supply chain, which has been stressed upon multiple times in the last few years. So on that front, the end point is not that only getting the product at the right quality at the right price. These are not the only two parameters which we'll be looking at. Going forward, it will be the environmental parameters, the quality parameters, as well as multiple other social parameters as well, which will be looked upon, right? So when we want to do all of these kind of checks and balances and filtration process for our vendors and supply chain partners, we also understand that they will have a different magnitude in terms of their business and scale. So like having everything in a standard format, it can only be achieved if there is a regulation. But without the absence of a regulation, it's the only the data can give an insight which you can put in to transform. Like your supply chain needs some kind of an awareness programs that can be extracted from the product, or let's say like the data. Then kind of once you have already known that the people in these supply chain partners or the value chain partners, they are already aware of these programs. That's when the innovation parts comes into picture. If you want to factor in new things, you have to have someone who understands your terminology and language, right? So that's where the second part of this program comes into picture, where you give some KPIs or goals or targets that you can monitor along with your supply chain partners. And that is where this entire ecosystems comes into the picture, because earlier it was more of a B2B what we used to talk, but now in the last few years, we have seen it has transformed into B4B. It's like business for business. That is how the supply chain has been more and more integrated, more and more ecosystem based, rather than being just a fulfillment activity for whatever the requirements may be. So from Oren, what we are doing right now is kind of helping the entire PSCI initiative for the pharmaceutical sector under the ESG key factors, or let's say even the quality or any other aspects that you want to do. So we revolve around the spectrum of data, how you can collect data from so many channel partners. And when I'm talking about data, it is not only limited to the raw material sourcing partners, but also your distribution channel, but also your vendors who are fulfilling your jobs, like environmental clearances and everything. So every services and every product is being every vendor's data put into a system, which will give you an insight that how they're performing in these areas, who can help you to drive your innovation, who can help you to reduce your risk, which are the multiple channels that you can use in terms of any climate catastrophe, in terms of any social unrest, in terms of any political disruption or anything. So all of these factors, when you look into your enterprise risk management framework, that is when the supply chain can be devised into, these are the chunks which can help us get out of this business practice. So yeah, this is what will be the summarization of what we do at Oren and how a supply chain transformation can look like when we have a digital data or a big data coming into the picture.
Absolutely. I think great points around capturing of the data and AI, right? But let us address the elephant in the room, which is around compliance, right? All of you have to go through so many compliances and so many regulatory frameworks. So maybe I'll come to you, Arun. In terms of, pharma as such, we know is one of the most regulated environments. Your supply chains are far and wide and sort of dispersed. You have vendors who are, of multiple, diversity within the suppliers that you have. And in addition to that, I think there's a lot of focus on quality, right? You have so many of these good vigilance practices, good manufacturing practices, and then you have the good distribution practices as well. So within that, where do you see the key challenges around compliances, and any thoughts around how some of these can be addressed as we move forward as well?
We are all aware that healthcare and pharma supply chain is very complex and highly regulatory driven business, where when we want to build a resilient and agile supply chain, it is also necessary to strengthen our upstream and the downstream activities. Suppose you talk about the upstream, means how are your sourcing basis, whether we have done all risk analysis, identified the risks, categorized the risks as low, medium or high, and what are all the mitigation plans, and what the modern tools which we will be using for identifying and mitigating this risks. As Ram and Abhirup was telling, the digital platform plays a very vital role for capturing the data, analyzing it and putting it into the right perspective for usage. When the pandemic started, in fact, I was in a pharma company where we approached a digital platform where they were able to create a online survey. This was, I am talking about in November 2019. That was the start of the COVID. So there we were able to build that platform in 24 hours, and we were able to circulate to the entire supply chain, our sourcing supply chain, when we were able to assess the risks which is going to come. And of course, that was a very late activity which we did. There was an impact on the supply chain. However, that was a learning for us, where we brought in very good tools like competency profiling or power profiling, and you talk about even tools like failure mode effect analysis for each of the risks. So we were able to address that, and today that's the backbone of the supply chain. And today we also look at the requirements from customers to supplier. So the entire value chain risks associated in the value chains are addressed. As far as the PLI, whatever the government initiatives are concerned, today still Indian pharma industries are not well connected with the academic institutes. Whereas if you talk about China or in the US, the big pharma majors are very well associated with the academic institute for their research activities. So that will bring a burden, that will lessen the burden on the capital investments, where definitely you cannot expect revenues in the R&D investments. Wherein if the government encourages this type of reputed academic institutes in India to collaborate with the industries, definitely the speed can be brought in the innovation, as well as it will result in getting the better products to the humankind. That's what I feel.
No, absolutely. And one of the points I want to highlight from what he said is that companies who sort of invested way before in digital, before the pandemic, right? Those are the companies which were able to tackle this in a very timely fashion. On a lighter note, I'll give you an example. He said November 2019. I was traveling in February 2020. I was coming back from Tel Aviv. I was completely unaware that what was going to hit us after, in the next few days, two Israeli young kids who were coming along with me. And they were frenetically cleaning the seats using the hand sanitizers and everything. And I was thinking, what is going on? And then I came back, and I think within 10 days we knew what was going on. So that is the power of data. If you have the data which is required for you to make such analysis, that becomes very, very critical. The other aspect I want to just touch upon, I think, because you have done a lot of work around digital and some of these areas, how do we drive compliance and quality through data and some of these technologies? Maybe if you can touch upon that as well, Ram.
Hello. Yeah. So regarding compliance, so that is one of the major issues which we face as a pharma industry, which all of you would agree. So let us first try to understand what is compliance. So what we have is generally there are guidelines which are published by let's say US FDA or European Union. So what we have to do is, based on those guidelines, we have to understand, and then we have to create our own SOPs, procedures, using which operators will be operating our processes, and that is how we will be producing our medicines and taking it to patients. So that is what the procedure is. Now, if we analyze the observations which we get from US FDA especially, there are two kinds of observation which they give. Observation number one is, you have not understood what we are telling you. So what happens is, US FDA is asking for something which we don't understand, and then we form the wrong SOPs and procedures. That is the first observation which we get. So which simply said, you don't understand what we say. So that is the first observation. Second observation is, you have understood what we have said, but you have not implemented it. So that is regarding problems in it is written, but somehow we are not implementing it. Now, if we see percentage of these observations, around 70% of observations are around the first part, which says that the way we understand regulation is very poor, and that is mostly because the regulations are at a very high level. So they would say it needs to be followed. Now, to bring it to reality, we have to understand what needs to be followed, how we have to make it to really low level. And that is where the power of data will come, because data is really low level thing. So everything is digitized, everything can be captured, and that can happen. Now, that's being said, done, but we cannot skip one most important thing, which is about creating subject matter expertise in our organizations. So we really have to take the guidances very seriously, and we have to really put our brain and try to understand what they are trying to say. That is the first thing, and which will require building a lot of subject matter capability. And data can really help in the second part. Once we know what is right, then implementing those. That is where data and digital tool analytics, all these things can help. And another thing which I would like to point out is we have only scratched the surface of what we can do with data and analytics. So currently, if I see, we are using most of our analytics in manufacturing. But of pharma business, there are many other aspects apart from manufacturing. So if you see compliance, it involves training, a lot of facility management and many other things where we have not started implementing power of data. And there we have to be really vigilant about what is coming next. So like we hear a lot about chat GPT, language models. So these are things which can really help us in compliance, because these models can understand what guidelines say, because they are now very smart and they can understand. And then they, if we have the right model, they can compare with all the SOPs, BMRs which we have, and highlight where we could get a FDA observation. So that is the future which I see. And really important will be to understand where technology is going, evolving, and have the ability to adopt those and really contextualize to pharma. So many things are happening for other industry and it can be contextualized for pharma. So I hope I have answered.
No, absolutely. And I think he touched upon the most buzzing word for now, which is chat GPT. Maybe Ram, you can try using chat GPT to see if they can translate any of those SOPs as well. If that works for you. But certainly, I think quality is the most important aspect. There's a lot of push around making more, producing more, which is through PLIs. But unless we maintain the quality standards, the sort of proving our competency around that to the global is going to be challenged every step of the way. Through data and analytics is what we sort of look at enabling this one. So maybe Abhirup, coming to you, if you can help us explain a little bit about Oren and how it can help through some of these data and analytics, right, in the pharma sector. Yeah.
Okay, so like what we do at Oren is primarily looking into the data from a risk viewpoint. So when we talk about risk, it can be categorized into multiple factors, which can be supply chain, it can be environmental risk, which can be again like risk associated with their social part. Again, supply chain is part of that, from employees and everything, right? So today, when we talk about data, as we are talking about the compliances requirement and SOPs and all of these things, everything can be quantified and can be captured. But the problem is that today we don't have any, like in India, again, as digital 4.0, industry 4.0 solutions are getting implemented in the pharma sector predominantly. So that's where digitalization is happening. So to get that data from your manufacturing units, from all your employees, from all your vendors, bringing everything together into a single platform and then making sense out of it. So that is what is the major like work that we do through the platform and the technologies that we have. So again, like we understand that today nobody can have 100% of their technology or the 100% of the data being digitalized, right? So that's where we also have the provision to kind of make it hybrid, where for any data which can't be collected through a sensor-based system or SCADA-based system, we can do it manually. But for rest, everything, wherever, if any company wants to implement that solution in a digital format, that can also be done parallelly, right? So once all this data being collected in a single platform, the next step is that how we can derive some insights out of it. So insights would be on the front of, let's say, like if I want to just reduce down my supply chain risk, as I mentioned earlier also, I can look into multiple factors and see that, yeah, this is what we can be implemented. These are the initiatives that even the system will be throwing out some recommendations based on this industry practices and the like location that we are present in terms of the country. So that recommendations can be used or utilized, and on those initiatives, what has been the progress, that's also something that you can track on the single system itself. So it gives you a complete viewpoint on these are my risks, these are the mitigation plans which are recommended by the system, and that is through the AI. And if you implement that, what will be a rough cost estimation for that, and what are the progress that I'm achieving out of it. So this is the entire viewpoint of the system. Apart from this, again, like as we are looking into compliance, compliance is nothing but kind of creating a report which is mandatory either on an annual basis or a quarterly basis, or for the one time for one of the approvals, right? So rather than someone doing it manually without, like, again, we can't phase out this problem of not interpreting the requirement rightly. But if you have interpreted the requirement of the compliance, then definitely the system can put it out in a format of a report or any compliance form, which can be generated from the system directly. So you don't have to put in a person to this problem of go figure it out what they need and how to collect that data and get these clearances done. That can be directly automated through the platform, and that's what we are doing at Oren. And along with that, we also have our advisory practices who are like people from the industry helping companies into manage on this ESG risks or like global risks, and risk compliance is something that I'll be looking at.
Wonderful. So enough. I mean, we have talked about in terms of the data and the requirement around data. I'll just switch gears a little bit, and Mr. PV Raju, I'll come to you. Is in terms of the vast supply chain that we have in pharma, which is extending to a diverse set of suppliers as well. So any thoughts around how do we sort of look at supplier onboarding process? Some of the areas that we should probably put focus on. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Sudipta, actually, we are looking in that now. Supplier onboarding, a usual process is like that. The basically involved by more first technical people, and interact with the vendor, get the samples tested, and then quality control guy can go and visit plant audit and certify that everything is nice, subject to commercials. Commercials is fine. Then they're onboarding the suppliers. Usually, most of the time, 90% every material is having a alternative option, alternative vendor. But 72% of these suppliers only audited by due to the cost factors of other many reasons. Most of the time, only 70% of the 72% approximately based on the industry information, only plants are audited. This is the usual process in the pharma. The missing piece in this is that financial analysis. So most of the time, the finance team is never involved in this supply onboarding. So they're missing this piece. So it's very important, the financial stability of the company, apart from that your quality, material, price, and all things. Apart from these three areas, they have to focus on the financial analysis, onboard the supplier. If you not do that, it's really you burn that. You supply look like a plant is very good, product is very good, audit also, so physical audit, everything is good. But the person who set up the company, brought the money, borrowed, he not able to manage. You qualified the supplier, submitted your NDA and everything with the US FDA. So when the product you want to manufacture and supply, the manufacturer will disappear, or he cannot able to manufacture, or your competitor acquire those companies because of financial instability. So taking into all these factors, apart from the internal audit and other assessment, need a financial analysis. Take their help. Maybe it's not a big cost actually. Maybe we are also using sometimes DNB for our assessment of our vendors, financial analysis. Get that financial stability apart from all these factors, and which will help a lot. And we also faced a similar kind of challenges during the pandemic, but we realized this piece is a compulsory the way forward to address your challenges.
No, absolutely touched upon the right points. I think where you source from is also very, very important. And, now there are tools and technologies which are available to you to sort of get a very comprehensive view of your suppliers, of your customers, your entire value chain. So great. I think we have done very good job in terms of the time. We have about 3 minutes. If there are any questions from the audience, we can take them now. For the panelists, we can take them now if there are any. If anyone can give him a mic.
Hi. I'm Vipul from Dun & Bradstreet itself. My question was that are we any close to achieving true medicine traceability, which is crucial for patient protection and to counter counterfeiting?
Hello. Yeah. So let me try to answer that. So as per the data which is there around, pharma companies lose around $200 billion annually because of counterfeit. And not only it has impact in terms of revenue, but there is around 1 million lives lost yearly because of this. So as you rightly pointed out, it is a very big problem. There have been efforts which have been taken, but still there are problems. And where I see is with blockchain coming in, so it can cover entirely from API till patient and can bring in a lot of traceability around that. But still it is at a very nascent stage. There are some companies which have started experimenting. I think Novartis and Merck are the two companies which have started experimenting with that. And as an Indian pharma company, we should pick it up. And apart from blockchain, there are some other technologies which are coming up, especially related to silicon wafers. So the idea is you can have silicon wafers which can be etched, and then they can be put inside the manufacturing process itself. So we will have tablets which will be etched with those silicon wafers. And if you put your mobile app, they can list out it is from Cipla or whatever is the manufacturer. So those are some efforts which are going on, but they are really at a nascent stage.
I'll just add to that, considering some of these innovations that are happening around, you mentioned about the nanomaterials and also the blockchain, right? One of the things that we are facing now is most of these are at a pilot stage, right? Because they are still evolving. So the real benefit that we will see is only when we sort of scale this. When we sort of take it to the scale that is required is only when you'll see actually how digital data and some of these will be, giving you the real value out of that.
Thank you.
Maybe we can take another question if time is there. We are at just about time, but if there are any questions, we can take those. Okay. Great. I think I'll thank the panelists, Mr. Arun, Mr. PV Raju, and Ram, as well as Arup. I think it was a great panel discussion. Hope the audience also enjoyed. Some of the key points that I sort of recall from the discussion was definitely around the product-linked incentives, the innovation-linked incentives, focus on data, focus on your quality aspects, the compliance that needs to be put in place. These are the critical areas, especially around supply chain, and to be able to really make our supply chain resilient, agile, and whatever other terminologies you want to add to it, but really putting the focus around this. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I would just request you, as usual, you know the drill now, to just wait for a minute. I'll call upon Mr. Vipul Oberoi, Director of Marketing, CSR and Learning Solutions for Dun & Bradstreet India, to hand over some mementos. First, we have Mr. Arun Kumar. Can we have a round of applause? Mr. PV Raju. Mr. Ram Kumar. Mr. Abhirup Das. And finally, our moderator, Ms. Sudipta Veerapaneni. Thank you, panelists. Can we have a huge round of applause for all our panelists here?